And Russia's foreign minister is in India. Sergei Lavrov met Prime Minister Modi and briefed him about the situation in Ukraine, including the ongoing peace negotiations. While Prime Minister Modi reiterated India's stand for an early cessation of violence, he also conveyed readiness to contribute to the peace talks. This is the first visit of any foreign, in fact, Russian foreign diplomat since the war began. And earlier, External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar held talks with his Russian counterpart. The high-level talks took place in the backdrop of indications that India could buy greater volumes of discounted Russian oil, and both sides were keen on having a ruble-rupee arrangement for bilateral trade. Russian Foreign Minister hailed India's stand on the issue. Meanwhile, External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar too emphasized on ending dispute through dialogue and diplomacy. And joining us on the broadcast right now is Suresh Goel, former ambassador, to help us understand the statements that were made by Russian Foreign Minister during his visit to India this time amidst the crisis between Russia and Ukraine. Mr. Goel, thank you for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now this evening. Russian Foreign Minister also said open to India mediating the Ukraine crisis. How do you see this statement? What do you make of, what all has come so far in the meetings that happened between Russia's Foreign Minister and Prime Minister Modi and Russia's Foreign Minister and the External Affairs Minister of the country?
I think that's a very important statement made by Sergei Lavrov, giving a kind of an opening for India to play a greater role in peace talks or to basically mediate in the ongoing scarfo between what Russia calls a special operations, which is actually a war, for India to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. I think we need to basically, what I can guess is that Russia at the moment is looking for openings in terms of economic issues. Russia is under great pressure because of sanctions, and therefore it has to find markets for what it does sell. Energy is a very important part of it. And therefore, as a kind of, attraction, as a kind of catalyst for that kind of a thing, and particularly India, which is an old friend, it would offer for India to mediate in the dispute. However, I would really think if India has to mediate, what kind of leverage does India have or would have either on Ukraine or on Russia? I really cannot think of any kind of a leverage that India can exercise. And if you remember, Zelensky himself had asked India to mediate, not Zelensky, his ambassador in Delhi, had asked India to mediate, which I think was basically a very casual statement, didn't really mean anything at all. Therefore, now for Lavrov to ask India to mediate, we need to be very careful about what actually is the possibility and whether we should or not. My own take would be that given the kind of limited leverage that India has either on Ukraine or on Russia, we might act as a facilitator, offer the venue, talk to each other, but mediation is something much beyond that, really. And considering that India does not have any leverage, we should try and stay away from that. But facilitation, yes. Yes.
Okay, interesting. India can act as a facilitator. Not really sure whether India can act as a mediator in this particular case. Let's also get the view of Shilkant Sharma, former diplomat, joining us. We are also joined by Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs. Good evening to both of you gentlemen as well. Mr. Shilkant Sharma, to you on the same issue that I asked Mr. Goel earlier, Russian Foreign Minister telling India that it's open to India mediating in Ukraine crisis. How do you see this statement?
Mediation in the present crisis has two dimensions. One is mediation between Russia and Ukraine. And the other is actually much larger mediation between Russia and the West, because the kind of sanctions which the West has now comprehensively imposed on Russia, they are very far-reaching, and as the US Deputy National Security Advisor in Delhi explained, they have prepared it well, and that's the only way to put pressure on Russia. Now, Ukraine-Russia talks are underway. Turkey has been helping them, and they've had several rounds, and another round was supposed to take place. As far as the talks between Russia and the West, which might be necessary, because after all, Ukraine is very closely allied to the West, though it is not a member of NATO. So there is a need also to, broker some kind of a modus vivendi between Russia and the West, so that they can move away from the brink, which somehow the other Putin's actions and Russian invasion has brought them to. And even now, when Russia says they are going to de-escalate or they are going to withdraw, the US and its allies are not willing to accept it. They say they will look for action rather than words. And also the news has come that Ukraine has now launched attack inside Russia. So, the situation is like a very, very typical war situation where both sides are engaging in hostilities, while at the same time talking. So in that kind of a situation, any help which they can get from outsiders who have a good standing, naturally they would like it. So I suspect Foreign Minister Lavrov, when he mentions this to India, it is in that vein. And I think our Prime Minister was very concise and very laconic when he said India is willing to be of play any constructive role in this whole process. So I think that is where the matter rests at this juncture. It is up to both sides to see whether they can find a good, go between who can do the modus vivendi. A modus vivendi is necessary at this juncture because there's no point, escalating this whole situation. And so India's thrust has been on diplomacy, peace, and the stopping of the, war, ceasefire. So these are the ingredients which are required, and of course the sanctions bit is more difficult. Because, yeah.
Okay. Now, Mr. Pinak, Ranjan Chakraborty, the statement by Russian Foreign Minister wherein he said that Russia is open to India mediating the Ukraine crisis comes after US issued, in a way, a warning to India against warming up to Russia.
Well, forget the USA. I think let's get back to the mediation part of it, which basically means that, look, Russia and Ukraine are like first cousins. I don't think they need mediators to really work out their problems. They know each other very, very well. And I don't think India can really help in mediating when the political objectives of this war are not very clear as to where does Russia stop and where does Ukraine may be defending, but then Ukraine is now taking the war into Russia in terms of attacking Russian sites, etc. And sort of, raising the bar, so to speak, on the fight, on the war. So I don't think India, while welcoming that we are willing to facilitate or whatever, but I don't think we have that leverage on both sides to play the role of a mediator. I mean, they are appealing to India because India is neutral, kind of, strategic autonomy, neutrality, positive or negative, whatever you would like to call it. But then it means that we are in a position where they think that India can help them, either side. And don't forget that the offer of mediation first came from Ukraine when the president, Zelensky was talking to Prime Minister Modi. So I don't think the mediation part is, I'm a little skeptical, basically, because they are talking to each other already. They are having talks in Istanbul. Their delegations are meeting. What is India going to put on the table? This is what I'm a little curious about and puzzled about. That why are they asking India to come in? I mean, they are talking directly. Well, India doesn't want third-party mediation in her sort of problems with Pakistan or China. We are very, very clear on that issue. So why should we get into that kind of a mediation role?
Mr. Goel, is it because sanctions have now started impacting Russia and hence it can rely on some of its old allies, which clearly includes, the list includes India as well? Because, the Russian foreign minister also said in India, if India wants to buy anything from us, ready to discuss and reach mutually acceptable cooperation, we will be ready to supply to India any goods which it wants to buy from us. We are ready to discuss even the kind of discount it's ready to offer on oil. Is it because these sanctions from the West this time are much different from 2014 and they are now impacting Russia and hence Russia is now preparing the ground? Because we all know this visit of Russia's foreign minister to India comes after his visit to China.
Let me put it this way. The sanctions, whether they were 2014 or now, etc., will bite. They will create a problem for Russia. And now, when Russian economy was coming out of the earlier difficulties, they will tend to bite more than what they would actually do in 2014. And therefore, Russia offering to India to buy whatever they wanted to buy from Russia is a part of the same thing, that somehow getting out of those economic difficulties. But coming back to the mediation, really, I don't think offer to India to mediate is caused by that kind of factor. I think, first of, there are 2 or 3 things here. Firstly, it was not Russia's intention to have a long war, as far as I can understand. They were expecting to finish the war much sooner than this, and having been entangled in Ukraine for such a long time is causing a great deal of distress, not only to economically, but also politically, because they're coming under great pressure from many countries now to really somehow end it. Number 2, the only way to end the war is to talk to each other. They are talking to each other in Ukraine, in Turkey, but also the fact is that they keep on changing. And when I say they, I mean primarily Zelensky. He says something in public. His representative says something else while talking to Russia. And nobody is certain what they actually have in mind. At the back of it is the USA, who keeps on saying one thing at one time and the second thing. And today, from the reports, it seems that they're not prepared to provide the security to Ukraine. And therefore, Ukraine is again left hanging at the long end of the rope. Therefore, I think when Lavrov says that India could mediate, it's a kind of a carrot dangling before India, that India could play a role when nobody else is playing the role. But the fact is, it is not an Asian problem. It's a European problem. It's a NATO problem. It's a European security problem, and India has no role to play in that problem. In fact, if India were to mediate and it wouldn't succeed, the whole problem will come back to haunt us. I think we need to be very, very cautious in this matter. It's a European problem. We should leave it to Europe to resolve it. And the only way I say it can be resolved is for NATO, USA, Europe, Russia to get together and talk about a common European security architecture, without which there might be a ceasefire, but there won't be a solution to the problem. Yes, Heena, I finished.
That's an important point you're making. Mr. Shilkan Sharma, now the point is that Biden's deputy NSA, Dileep Singh, had said that if China breaches the LAC, Russia wouldn't come running to India's defense. Now, that is also something we cannot really ignore. And after this statement only, we had the foreign minister making a statement like this. So is it also, in a way, a signal that Russia is trying to send to the West because of the relationship that India has with the US and the relationship it has with Russia right now? And India so far has maintained its neutral stand.
there is certainly, a point for inflection point in the international affairs at this juncture. And one of the manifestations of that inflection is that both Russia and China are showing a certain mellowing. Russia, Mr. Lavrov was here 2 years back when he visited last time, and there was at the Vivekananda Foundation, they had organized a talk by him. His speech was very different at that time. At that time, we were concerned about Russian arms to Pakistan. And he was talking very statesman-like that, we do with every country and not at everyone's expense and things of that sort. The language was very different, diplomatic and, a touch of condescension. Today, it is very different because they are under pressure. They are very, very under great pressure. And so if the Chinese, for instance, the Chinese foreign minister, when he came, it was at his own initiative. And unlike previous such visits from China, when they always did some pataka, something or the other to put us slightly, in a kind of unnerving situation. This time there was nothing of that kind. He came and then he met. So I suspect this is because in my understanding, this is my personal understanding, that Russia probably has gone beyond in its action in Ukraine. It had a case and which they had tried to present for a very long time. But by doing what they have done in Ukraine and the way the media has portrayed violence and devastation and humanitarian crisis, they seem to be at the receiving end. And so they have to, the war is not working according to their plans. So there is a certain attempt maybe to reconsider and retract. So in that process, a help from friends naturally could be forthcoming. And I think Turkey is doing that in the process, helping both Ukraine and Russia. So the point about Dilip Singh saying that China's case, Russia will not come. Well, we have lived with that situation for a very long time. In 1962 also, Russia never came to our help. They were making a distinction between Chinese brothers and Indian friends. And it was only JFK when he said, John Kennedy, when he said that India should be helped, that the Chinese withdrew on their own. So it's, and then in the 60s also, it's no use going back on the history, but in the 60s, in 65 war, what was Russian position? They were somewhat, ambivalent or distant. And it was the US which actually was putting some kind of a restraint on Pakistan by withdrawing arms supply and things of that sort. So Russian help came to us in 71, for which that's where there was a relationship which changed completely. But even there, as one of the commentators, I think Ambassador Suresh Goel said in another channel, which is true that even Soviet Union at that time was guarded in its support. They supported us fully on the Bangladesh front, but on the Western front, they were saying that, look, don't go far, stop it now, because they cannot hold on for a long time. So, this is the kind of international situation which we have lived with. And in that kind of situation, we know what... So I think we don't need to hear it from Dilip Singh. We understand the situation ourselves, I suppose.
Okay. I want to give the last word now to Mr. Chakraborty on the comment by Biden's deputy NSA, because like I mentioned earlier, whatever is happening here in India, this visit of Russian foreign minister, there's also a message that Russia is trying to send to the US, and we are seeing the impact too there.
Well, I think both sides are trying to sort of woo India or sort of hector India. The American side is trying to do a bit of hectoring because that's their style. And unlike the Russians, they don't do that kind of stuff. And we are used to that kind of thing. We have heard it before, this kind of hectoring from the Russians. I think the deputy NSA who came here and said all those things may have said it through inexperience. I mean, I don't know how much, how much he knows about this history of India and USA in terms of the nuclear deal, etc., and what we went through at that time. So the playbook is very simple from the US side. The try and hector, then the State Department today again sort of rolled it back a bit, saying that India has a different relationship with Russia. We understand that, and we are not in a position to influence or check it. So this is the kind of game that is going on. Unfortunately, India knows this game.
Okay. Thank you very much, all of you gentlemen. I'm completely out of time, but I appreciate all of you for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now this evening. With this, we will slip into another very, very short break, but there's lots lined up for you on the other side as well. Don't go anywhere.